Good evening, America. In consultation with my family and loved ones, I have made the decision that I shall not seek and I will not accept your nomination as Vice President of this United States of America. One of the reasons is that I've got this very lewd podcast where I say words like fuck and shit. And I'm told that is going to make my job harder. as having a paper trail of internet stuff has recently informed, if not just J.D. Vance, then the people who nominated him, that so I'm 39 years old, and so is he. And so I was thinking, man, let's see what it's like to have an elder millennial be in the crosshairs of Oppo research in the era of he had a blog spot over a decade ago. And the shit that he said. I would be in trouble. The Internet Archive has the goods on why exactly I'm not exactly presidential material. Welcome to the program that I you know what? I'm putting podcast over country by continuing to prioritize this bi-weekly-ish thing that I do. It's a conversation. It's a never-ending conversation about nothing. As Jerry Seinfeld first told us, that some of the best entertainment in the world comes from low expectations. So I'm here. Version 17 title. The breaking change of the episode is Shallow Tissue Massage. That'll make sense in just a minute. A lot of life updates. I'll go back to front, even though I'm told you're supposed to never go back to front from like a bacteria perspective. I just got back from Volcano Bay, which is a water park that is part of the Universal Studios Orlando Resort. USOR is how Reddit will, or UOR. Oh, who? I'm a big old dummy. It's Universal Orlando. You see, this is how, there I lost my card. It's a water park. It is a technologically advanced water park in a lot of ways. It's well designed, thoughtful. I'd never been before, but a friend had extra tickets. So I got to visit, spend a few hours. Some very cool rides. They've got ways to accelerate a toboggan that you wouldn't believe. It was also very hot, and it was sold out. And it's late July in Central Florida. The parking situation, I could tell you all about how to not set up parking for a water park if you want people to have a good time. It took me door to door. I left here at 10:15 a.m. I was in the park at roughly noon. And I live maybe 6.8 miles away. But I was there. I was visiting with a friend. We had a good time. One of the things about theme parks, if you're an adult person and you don't go to theme parks very much, one of the things that I really have found that I love about theme parks is that I don't love to go by myself necessarily. I love to go with friends, loved ones, family, because there is so much built-in dead time. You're waiting at the toll booth for the parking, right? You're waiting in line. It's all similar to the cadence. Like if you just zoom out and look at what your body's doing, you are hurry up and wait in the same way that you probably associate with airline travel. But the resting stress level is low enough that the waiting isn't so bad. You're not about to get felt up by a TSA security guard. In fact, the security guards at these parks are pretty benign. And so in those sort of the negative space of not having anything else to do, I find that it forces getting to know you kind of questions, icebreakers, asking the questions you wouldn't even get to with somebody if you were out to dinner with them. Or even if you saw them often, but just in smaller increments, right? Like there's a certain amount of conversation time with a friend where you spend 10, 20, 50, 30 minutes together, an hour together. And if you only see them every week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, there's enough in the interregnum since the last time that you saw the person to kind of maintain an interesting conversation about contemporaneous bullshit that's going on in your life. But if you're doing theme parks, if you're doing a theme park day, you're getting up together. You're probably sharing all the meals of the day together. You may be in parks for, I mean, some people really go, overachieve, and they're in there from open to close, and then see the fireworks at the end, and they wait in traffic. But even if you just do a leisurely 10 a.m. start to dinner, that's a lot of time, and it's a lot of time where you're out of your normal routine and element. There's something magical in just the space that creates for friendships and relationships. And there's people that like I've only met here in Florida since moving here in 2020, that because I find myself frequently in downtime land, surrounded by all of these distractions and everything else, you'd think it would be like, oh, everyone's just sort of like living this super superficial, this existence that's very plastic and surface level. There is that, don't get me wrong, but I've been thinking lately, a lot of the friends that I've made here, man, I feel like I know them better than friends that I've known for years back in Ohio or Michigan. So I don't know. There's a sense of commute. When I grew up, right, and I lived in what I felt was a normal ass, Wonder Years looking ass neighborhood, where the kids all got kicked out of the house if it wasn't school day, and we'd I'd either play street hockey, or I'd play baseball in Billy Stewart's backyard, or I'd go to the park that was kitty corner from us, and we'd play basketball. And it would always just be the rat children of the neighborhood, and we'd all be friends, and we'd all get to know each other. But it wasn't just true for us; it was true for the parents too. That there was this natural coexistence that happened. That we can point to a bunch of reasons why that's not quite a thing anymore. Now you go through nice neighborhoods, people are never outside. I have met my next door neighbor on the stage left side, stage right. I don't know how to orient which side of the house. If you're looking out the front door, the neighbor's on the right. They probably don't listen to the podcast because I've met them one time, and the one time I met them was the day after Hurricane Ian. Maybe I saw them before and after because we talked about our prep. We're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. And all of our trees fell down, but other than that, it was fine. Turns out Italian cypress trees, the really long, pointy, skinny ones, not native to Florida, and they tend to not develop their kind of root system in our whatever passes for soil here to withstand gale force winds. So I just, I very quietly removed them, and I did not necessarily get approval from the HOA because they were down already. What was I doing? I was just cleaning up. All right. So back from a water park, I've got that water park, like just general chlorine feeling. I took a shower, but I'm still, it's like you feel sanitized, but not clean. Where to go from here? A lot of theme park stuff this week. It's been height of summer, I guess. It's getting so hot that it's almost a shoulder season. Where a shoulder season, I guess, is I've learned recently some people aren't familiar with that phrase, but it's a time of lower occupancy of like fewer tourists in the area because Of course, at the holidays, spring break, it peaks. There's, the first week after school gets out. But by the time you're into like late July and August, it's like, I don't need to leave the Midwest to come down to Florida. It's hot enough up here. Thank you. So, yeah, a lot of hanging around the parks. While I'm thinking about park stuff, Becky and I, we had a hashtag in Parks and Rec tradition. We had a hashtag Treat Yourself Day where we got not couples massages, mind you, because a couples massage, there are, I think Becky's with me on this, that couples massages make very little sense. You are in a room with two massage therapists while you and your sweetheart lie face down on different beds, not close enough together to hold hands, not like you're going to be engaged in conversation, not like you're, if it's romantic, are you supposed to look like when you watch a comedy show and you're not only by yourself, but no one's in earshot. You watch a piece of comedy on the internet. Somebody sends you a clip and it's hilarious. If it's me, I will watch it and I will think that's hilarious. And I will reply with ha 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 ha, or LOL, or literally laughing out loud, or whatever. If it's not funny, I'll just do the ha ha tap back emoji to prove that I saw what they said. I will not verbally laugh, right? If a laugh, falls in the theater and no one's there to hear it, was it really funny? So laughter is a communication mechanism. It's to other people. And some people will laugh their head off in a room by themselves. And, from my perspective, I don't know if this is the way I was raised or just how I'm put together, but like if you're laughing in a room by yourself and no one can hear it, I hope that wall is padded. It just doesn't compute. So when I laugh, it's because maybe I'm in a room with somebody else, and if we're sharing the experience, then laughing together is a wonderful thing. If you're in a room with somebody and one of you is laughing as you're consuming content separately, and one of you laughs or chuckles, at that point, I'm willing to concede that it's still possibly involuntary, right? Once in a while, I'll see something funny and I'm trying to signal to the person next to me like that they should ask and inquire, like, hey, I hope the person next to me shows some curiosity in what I'm watching because I would love to show it to them. And I'm too chicken shit to suggest it to them. So once in a while, I will, ham up a laugh, I think, for the explicit communicative purpose of the laugh. But I have caught myself struggling to not laugh out loud when other people are around. So there's something deep, deep down here that I think we need to get to the bottom of that. But here's what we don't get to need to do. As a non-professional podcast host, it's okay when I flub my lines. Did you know that all 3 hours of these episodes are scripted word for word? I'm reading them from a teleprompter. Could you imagine? I'm just here. If this podcast were shorter, you might actually think that was possible. But nope, you're just getting real, raw, uncut me. All right. What I'm saying is, if you're in a couples massage and you're sharing a room and you're both face down and the massage therapist hits the spot, really gets in there, and now your loved one's in the room. Like, so for me, if I'm in a massage, I'm extremely quiet. I do not talk unless there is some in-flight turbulence. Like, and I need to say, hey, usually 90% of the things that I have said during a massage is I can handle more pressure. And usually the response I get is more pressure isn't going to fix the bullshit that you've done to your body. It's like I can't, no amount of pressure can unwind the years of stress that you have contorted yourself into. Don't put that on me. So I often just stay quiet. But I don't, somebody makes a wonderful meal. Same kind of thing, right? Somebody makes you go, and you catch yourself and you're like, why am I exaggerating this verbalization, this vocalization that the food is good? It's because I want to show appreciation. If I'm in a massage, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, you're not going to like groan like a walrus and be like, yeah, that was the spot. I just wouldn't do it. It would be weird. I think that there is now if you're going to a prim and proper like actual spa where you're doing massages with licensed therapists, right? There's no sexual element, but you are naked. And there is a relatively large industry of things called massage that are very sexual. So I think at least as a man with a female massage therapist, anything that I do to add to what could be seen as like a sexual sounding moan. There's the word moan. You moan in a pleasant fashion as your massage unfolds. That's like, that's damn near harassment, I would say. I don't know. Look, I've never really massaged a person. Not seriously. Not on purpose. I've ridden the trains at rush hour in Tokyo quite a lot. So, it doesn't count as groping as long as hands are up and it's all unintentional and you're just getting pushed. Man, I could talk about groping policies on Tokyo rush hour trains, by the way. Oh, God. Be careful out there. All this to say, let me wind this back. I'm really earning my explicit Boolean value in the XML feed of this podcast right now. All of this to say, if I'm in a 2-seater massage room with my spouse, and then each of us having work done by separate massage therapists, nothing can make that better than just having simultaneous massages in separate private rooms. Because like either, in my case, Becky will engage in lively conversation with their massage therapist the whole time, right? Scenario 1. The other person's a chatty massage recipient. Now I've got to like listen to that, but like also try to not engage, as if to signal like, hey, I'd rather have this be serene and like focus on, the experience. The next thing that could go wrong, right, is something like the moaning, something like the laughter that I can't hold in when I'm around other people watching a, funny video with AirPods in, right? What if the moaning comes out? Now I've done a bad thing and there are 3 witnesses. Now I'm writing a letter to the GM of the spa and being like, I want you to know these moans were taken out of context. Don't want to be in that place. Third scenario is everyone's silent the entire time, and you're just kind of hearing the sounds of myofascial release happen. And what's that doing for you, right? Like, if there's romance in that, I am not sure I'm put together that way. I don't see it. So, hey, if you've had an amazing couples massage experience, please stop what you're doing. Pull the car over. podcast@searles.co. Tell me what it's all about. I need to hear it. This massage was special for a couple of reasons. It was first one I had in a long time. I started kind of like since before I went to Japan, and so I lost a lot of muscle mass because I was like basically not working out for a month and eating like garbage. And I came back and I sort of like slow rolled it, and so I built up some muscle again. I've also built up all of the bad habits that result in me hurting myself. So I really could use a massage, but I found myself I am incredibly tight. Like I can tell my brain, hey, loosen up these muscles. Hey, let go. Let these shoulders rest. And they will rest like when I'm at home with a cocktail playing a video game. But like if I'm on the table, I'm thinking about relaxing. And thinking about relaxing is different than relaxing because now I am trying to help. I'm trying to proactively let go, and letting go is a thing that just happens. So for the first time in my life, I had, there was some complimentary champagne offered. I had 2 healthy glasses of Prosecco, which I realize is not champagne. This sparkling wine was complimentary, so I'm pretty sure it was not from the Champagne region of France. I drank 2 full two full flutes. A real, not quite, version 16. I talked a lot about surface tension, so, we're on the same page there. Not to the point of surface tension. Couldn't float a cork on it. But they were full, and I drank them a little fast. And I got into the massage, and I thought, you know what? There's probably a sign somewhere in the locker room saying not to do what I just did. I'd never tried it before. I've never been like high while getting a massage. But one thinks, right? You think about what alcohol typically does. I had the best goddamn massage of my life. I even fell asleep for like, I think a 2-3 minute phase while she's working on my back left leg, which is a tender part. Running all day, every day, or running every day for 15 years. So, and it was so effective. Like all of my muscles just unwound, just fell down. Red carpet. She did the thing. She was an excellent massage therapist separately, I think, to the best of my perception ability. When you're face down, you can't see a person, right? It's like, is that an elbow? Is that forearm? How is she putting that much weight on me? Is she leaning over the table? I don't know. I don't know. I have active imagination. I keep all of my good app ideas happen 5 minutes into an 80-minute massage. And then I got to like hold them in my brain actively for 75 minutes. God, it's a wonder why I have a hard time relaxing. So all that to say, if you want to release the toxins in your body through the magic of massage therapy, consider putting some toxins inside your body first. It seems to have worked for me. So that was a great, if I could probably settle for way less skilled massage therapists at cheaper venues if I just, bring a 40 with me. So it's a pro tip. It's an economical approach. Let's see. I guess I said it was working back to front. I guess I'll stick with it. We had we checked into a hotel. We were doing a staycation. We like to do that every now and then. And I heard for what may be, I don't know, the 100th time from a customer support person, the exact phrase of, I've never seen that before. So this is the, I've never seen that before of the week. I was checking into a hotel. We had paid in full in advance. It was a nice, expensive one-night stay. It was a treat. As part of the hashtag treat yourself, staycation. And, we went to the check-in. I talked to the guy. He asked me my name. You've been through this ordeal, I'm sure. He can't find the reservation for my name. I was like, all right, well, my friend helped me book it, so maybe it's under her name. No, it's not under her name. Well, I'm like, well, I can give you the reservation number. I give him the reservation number, and he looks at it. And he immediately, his face sours. Dan was his name, in case you're curious. So Dan's face is just like, oh. And then he gets on the phone. And he calls somebody in the back, and he's like, well, is there anything can we get? But what if he's, like the cutoff on the other end with some man behind the curtain. And Becky comes over, sidles up next to me. Whenever I'm in a customer support problem, having her at my side is useful because she is not a gremlin. She is a likable person. I have 2 modes, like bad cop and inappropriate cop. and she has, several flavors of good cop available, so it's nice to have her there. So she asks Dan, who's no longer thinking about me. She asks Dan, "What's up? What's wrong with our thing?" And he said, "Well, the funny thing is, I've never seen this. You have 2 reservations made within, the exact same timestamp. And they're both canceled. They were both canceled yesterday." I was like, "That's very odd." He's like, "Yes, I've never seen this. Did you call and cancel?" I was like, I don't think so, because I'm here. It was just 2 flutes of champagne, and those were more recently than the timestamp. I said, "Hey, well, what do we do?" And he said, "Well, I need to get my manager involved." He gets the manager. The manager, and this is just what customer support is in the era of everything is run by software. I see him open the exact same page of the same app, clicks the exact same things in the same order, places a phone call to who appears to be the same people, hears the same thing, and comes back and says, and I only get, so you replay the whole movie for each tier of support, and the only difference is that each tier can get you 1 inch deeper down the rabbit hole of what the fuck actually happened. So it seems like what happened was it was canceled because of non-payment. And I was like, that is very weird, given that you require a credit card to reserve the room, and that I punched it in and I hit okay. And it's the same Amex that I'm holding right here. That hasn't been canceled, nothing like that. Here's the email, right? And it says all of this information on it. It's got the payment information. It's got the card. And he said, "Hey, well, it's the thing is our servers are saying it's not paid." All right, sure. Okay, well, I start looking at my Amex statement. I can't find it. So then I start to piece together that I think what probably happened was when they tried, because of this duplicate reservation that happened, maybe because I double clicked a button, for fuck's sake. I don't know. With my luck, I probably clicked, reserve before some very slow asynchronous use effect callback in the shitty React app phoned home. Because as we all know, in the 90s and the 2000s, the surefirest way to have a bad time buying something online was to double click a submit button. Nowadays, it's just being fast at your computer at all. Because you could potentially click a thing when you're in the seconds long loading of some asynchronous function that the dummy who made the app didn't think about, the state of the application in that interregnum when something's loading, because their dev machine's fast. They're not on cellular inside of a big hotel building. So I'm like, all right, so what do I appear to, I'm talking to the manager. I'm like, I appear to have not paid. Maybe it did a pending auth and then it canceled, but presumably, because of these 2 dupes, maybe it just tried to maybe the streams crossed and it just canceled both or something. But he sees it. He agrees it's weird. He puts a temporary auth for the price of the room on my card. And the funny thing about it, and the thing that kills me, and the reason I'm sharing this with you, as people who at least know somebody that does something with software, the thing that kills me about this is as soon as there was a problem with what was clearly their reservation system, their frustration was clearly, from a body language perspective and from the time that this was taking, this was 45 minutes, was directed at the apparent cause of the frustration, which was the guest being at the front desk. None the wiser. I committed 0 sins other than clicking too fast, I'm sure. And humans, like all of the animals of God's kingdom, we evolved in a world where if you feel under threat and your cortisol's up, or you're annoyed and you're emotionally inflamed and aggravated, you will generally explain and direct those things at the people in the room and what's happening. So he clearly in his mind, I was the kind of like, I was the stimulus for the problem, if not the root cause. But there's so many layers now in how, and I think this is actually, it's, yes, software has been an integral part to all aspects of travel for years and years. But I feel like we have only recently, in like the last 5 years, almost maybe in the post-COVID era, reached a point where the workflow systems that customer service staff have to deal with in hospitality are so locked down and so on rails that they literally have no more ability to go off script. Because like it's comical when software is the thing holding us up. Like the what I'm trying to say is the hotel was mostly empty. Tons of spare rooms. I could tell. He could tell. And the entire back and forth, both Dan and also manager guy, with the phone was, can we reinstate this reservation? And the answer was no. It cannot be reinstated. But if you've got a confirmation and you can see it, and I've got a credit card and you can swipe it, and you've got that little magnet key thing that can take the key card and type in an arbitrary 4-digit number and magnetize that key to open that door. All of the parts and pieces are there that a manager, one would assume, and this was true in the olden days of 2010, a manager could say, oh, you know what? The system's being screwy. I'll take your card, I'll put a temporary auth, and I'll get you your room key and just go on your way. And then we'll sort this out tonight. There was none of that. It was very clear that if the person on the phone didn't figure out how to press what button in what order, we were not staying there that night. Like there was no workflow that was pre-imagined for this failure state. And writing software that works when everything goes great is hard enough. Writing software that handles the anticipated exceptional situations is, frankly, exemplary. Writing software that gives the people using it the tools that they need when it breaks in unexpected ways is apparently impossible. Apparently, it's just outside the bounds of what anyone does. And it's depressing to me as somebody who prides themselves on spending a lot of time just deep in thought of all the ways that something could be could go wrong, what to do if it goes wrong. And more than that, like the tools that I select when I build software, it's architecturally speaking, I'm choosing tools with stable foundations and predictable behavior in all of those exceptional situations so that I can have a chance in hell of recovering at least well enough to let the user know what's going on. But we're just in so many different layers of poorly written software that can't handle exceptions, that like the combinatorial explosion, right, of like how many things can go wrong at every layer in the stack that the person who you're speaking with has to deal with. It's almost becoming like any one thing goes wrong and the Jenga tower falls over, and then there's just no recourse. So anyway, we did get a room. It did get reinstated. The person on the phone apparently had some pity on us or found the button. Oh, right. The only other thing I'll say about this trip up 10 minutes up the road, I asked the massage therapist, say, hey, I can handle more pressure. And because it felt very, light. And she adjusted a little bit. And, I politely waited another 10, 15 minutes before being like, I could handle more pressure. I don't mind deep tissue. And using the phrase deep tissue massage apparently triggered a policy and procedure that was at least not happening in software. She didn't have to pull up a computer to tell me that And this was a Disney spa, mostly because it's the closest thing in the neighborhood that was nice. So the Disney spa has a policy, no deep tissue massage, because there's they consider that to be a medical thing. And presumably they don't want the liability of pushing people too hard. And I said, well, okay, I got it. Well, do you do cupping, with those silicone cups that you put on people's bodies, and because they have a suction effect, it gives you the push and pull of you put the pressure down, you use the cup to pull it up, it gets the blood flowing too. And they said, I'm sorry, but another policy is Disney doesn't allow us to use cups for cupping because some guests will get upset that it leaves bruises and marks, and it might cause confusion at the pool if people see other people with bruises. I'm like, all right, I get it. So there's a joking expression of Disney spicy, like food can only be so spicy here because if a single guest complains that it's too spicy, that's one too many. The people here, they're much more, most people who come to Disney World are looking for a Heinz ketchup zone. And yeah, finding genuinely spicy food in this particular area surrounded by all these resorts, there's a lowest common denominator element, which is deeply disappointing as somebody who loves spicy food. Apparently, it also applies to pressure. So this was a Disney firm massage. And thank God for alcohol, because it loosened me up enough that was enough to do the job. So that's some little local color. So staycation, super relaxing. Just wish that no software was involved, but that's increasingly becoming impossible. I won't belabor the point, but I have had nothing but bad luck with software lately. Becky's Apple Watch reset itself because I unpaired another watch. So if you can have multiple Apple Watches paired to a phone. Becky had just her one. I added another one to sort of play around with having a smaller watch that she could slip on. Because the Ultra is a chonky boy. And then the setup didn't work or whatever. And so I clicked reset setup. And when I did that, it unpaired both watches. And I've seen this before. It happens every fucking time. So then both watches are unpaired. And I'm like, well, now she's got no watch. So I repaired the watch she cares about. And after doing that, everything works fine, restores from backup, it looks right. But the home key, that is to say the NFC key to your home, where you can use NFC locks, we have 2 of them. The home key is still on the phone, but it won't be added to the watch. The watch just won't take it. You can add key a million times and click the thing and it says add to watch later. You might need to reset your locks and repair them and do all the scenes again, and all the automations and all that. And ugh. And it's been, I think we're on 3 weeks of asynchronously trying to work this out now. I won't go through the entire play-by-play, but I have now successfully isolated it to her particular hardware. There's something wrong. I've reset all the devices. I've removed all the locks. I've reset all the HomeKit things. I added a third watch into the mix and paired that with her thing, and that was able to take the key. That was telling. So I'm, I guess the moral of the story is if everything is kind of working in your life, don't touch anything. Just don't. Oh, somewhere in the process too, Becky's Apple ID got locked. Excuse me, they're called Apple accounts now. Her Apple account was locked, but none of her devices were complaining about it. It was only when I was in the watch app and I went to her iCloud button, then it said, hey, by the way, your device is locked or your account is locked. I was like, well, that might have something to do with it. So I fixed that. Okay. I'm going to take a deep breath here. My only other note. Should I? Yeah, my only other note is I've written about this before. I wear the same t-shirt, underwear, socks every day. Same pair of shorts 90% of the days here in Florida. I've got I replace them every 6 months, but I buy all the shirts. Excuse me. I replace the socks and the shirts every 6 months. I've got these ex officio boxer briefs that have like would survive nuclear holocaust. Apparently, they're like 10 years old and they're still flawless. You know, it's a old timey, like back when clothes were good and durable. I'm sure that if I bought from the same brand now, they'd be threadbare in a week. But anyway, I do one clothes order a year. I buy, what is it? 7, one for each day. T-shirt times 2, because every 6 months I change it. So I get 14 t-shirts, buy in bulk. They come out to like $6 each. And they're really nice. They're tri-blend, very fancy. And I get 7 different colors. I have just cheap Adidas socks. I change out when I need to. And I roll up. This is real behind the magic here. I roll up each of the like the tuples, t-shirt, underwear, and socks. So when I do laundry, I do it once a week. Because I'm wearing clothes when I do it. It's usually 6 things at a time. Because it's all, from a categories perspective, they're all the same kind of thing. So it goes very quickly. I roll them all up and I put them away. And I try to, when I pull clothes so that things wear evenly, when I pull clothes out of the drawer each morning, I always go left to right. So it's like, oh, today's red shirt day, so I'll wear my blue shorts. Oh, today's blue shirt day, I'll wear my khaki shorts. This is a lot of, I realize this is a level of detail that you did not bargain for. But now that I'm not going to be vice president of America, I've got plenty of time to optimize, every motor skill involved in doing my laundry. There's a problem, though, which is that within the same product of t-shirt, different colors will feel completely different. It's a quality control thing for sure. It's also the way certain dyes work. But I've got this one color of shirt out of the 7 that's like stone colored. It's like a denim color. It's a very light blue. But it's like really starchy and unpleasant to touch. And so it's like a solid 1/4 inch shorter as well, because it's just like less flexible. And I hate wearing it. So it always gets pushed to the right side of my drawer. And if I'm one day before laundry time and I think of it, I almost always do the laundry so I don't have to wear that fucking shirt. So it's fucked up my entire system. And the only opportunity for me to cure is like next year's order time, right? Because unless I were just to throw away this, I realize I'm talking about like $30 of shirts. Wait, more than that, right? It's 14 times 6. Yeah, I'm talking about serious money. I realize that I pay way less money for clothes than most people do for a year of clothing. If I just replace that one shirt with a good one, then it'll be way less worn than the other shirts. So I can either replace all my shirts now, replace just that one shirt and keep track of it, and then replace it later, or replace it prematurely with the other ones. And so I spent so much time just thinking, what, the right thing, like in the micro sense, every single time this comes up in my brain, I think the right thing to do is after these shirts are worn down, just don't order that kind of shirt again. And I'm a few months out, and I realized the other day that I have thought this to myself 48 times this year. And I could probably afford to replace all my shirts. I haven't pulled the trigger. But there are people who are concerned in my life that the degree to which I have systematized my clothing is a problem. And I hear you. I think it's finally making sense. I will say it's pretty delightful that I can like do all my laundry and have it be just done and not thought about, like in other than the asynchronous waiting for the washer and dryer to go, like a grand total of 7 or 8 minutes of effort. That's pretty nice. All right. Well, that's what's going on in my life, I guess. I got other things I can talk about, but I think I've probably done enough to make you think that it's time for me to move on. I appreciate that you're here. I am realizing too that it was a lot more chlorine in this water park than I'd bargained for. I feel like I'm gonna have to wash my hair several times. I suspect I'm gonna let you finish 1 second. I just suspect that the chlorine levels in a water park, that's got tens of thousands of people, coming through it each week, those are probably higher than just your run-of-the-mill pool, aren't they? Like, I can tell my eyes are bloodshot. That's not a good sign. So, all right. Well, I can't see the buttons due to the bloodshot eyes, but I'm going to press the next one here. Well, it's time for follow-up, and I'm realizing that every time I want to talk about this app that I've been building, I guess it goes in the follow-up bucket because software is never done. I've been working on this in different ways since January, and I'm really bad at estimating. There's a reason that I always charged hourly or weekly, because I thought I'd be done in like March. Now, no one is surprised. Becky and I look back on this app that I'm building her. If you don't know, I'm building her an application that's like it delivers strength training programs each month to its subscribers. It's not yet launched, but she's got a sort of a stealth mode beta that she's been doing manually for a bit over a year. And as we try to flesh out everything that goes into the app, what we want is for somebody to be able to subscribe to this, learn a lot about how to do strength and resistance training, how to get stronger without needing an individual relationship with a trainer. So a self-service way to, from a single voice, from my wife, Becky, like learn about this stuff and learn a system that makes sense to be able to feel confident going to the gym, to be able to understand what you're being asked to do as you follow a program, and to get the results that you want without injuring yourself. And importantly, like being able to celebrate your achievements as you go and feel good about it. Whereas, like, just as an aside, I guess, like I was, as a morbidly obese fat kid, terrified of gyms. I still bristle. The idea of group fitness is, trauma is a big word, but like I tense up. I can't really engage, even though I am trim at this point. So this is I'm a white dude who's privileged, right? So I walk into a gym and people at least often look at me and assume I know what I'm doing, and they don't try to show me how to use basic equipment. So one of the things to try to deliver a web application that can deliver on that promise. Boy, words are hard. In order to build an app that can deliver on the promise that I'm describing, you need video. You need a lot of video, right? Like, you can have all the text in the world, but like that's going to be overwhelming, especially as somebody who's learning. You need a friendly face explaining it to you and demonstrating proper form and all this. And so this application is not... I've not done a lot of video in the past. I'll be honest. This is the first time I'm storing like a lot of assets that are uploaded by users. In this case, the user being the admin. So I at least know I'm not like dealing with an unbounded potential number of gigabytes and terabytes of video going to the cloud. But I want at least 1080p quality assets, helping her like make sure they're all consistent. They're encoded the same way everywhere. So there's a ton of video, and there are pages where, like, before a workout that I recently built this kind of the workout setup page, where you're going to see a list, in addition to the other kind of configurations for the workout, a list of all of the movements that you'll experience during that workout, and a UI control that lets you swap out any of those movements, bicep curl or whatever. You can swap it out for like, it's a it's a barbell bicep curl, maybe is what's in the program. I could swap it out for a dumbbell bicep curl. in advance of starting, right? So I can kind of scroll through and see the equipment needed and so forth. As I was building that page as the developer, I was finding that it was really, really taxing to my development server, which should be a red flag. Like I'm running on a very fast Mac. Nothing here is happening that's like a lot of work. What I found was Safari in particular will pretty aggressively, even if you put in the HTML for it not to, pretty aggressively try to fetch the video, even if the person hasn't clicked on the thing. There's a poster image right in front, got like a cute little WebP version of the same video, so you kind of see like a little like low fidelity clip before you click in. And my thinking was, that way it'll save me a bunch of bandwidth and them a bunch of bandwidth and them a lot of processing, because they won't load the actual fucking video until they click it. Unfortunately, like Safari does not. I spent a lot of time on this. Safari don't give a fuck, and it will load the real video, and it will load all as you scroll through the 16 movements. It will load that video 16 or those videos 16, all of them, and it'll start seeking. And there's the initial request for metadata, and I could provide that, but like it's doing much more aggressive buffering than it should be. To the point where now I'm like, man, even though I've got CloudFront, which is a CDN that's optimized for delivering stuff, so it wouldn't make the application slow or anything for me. And there's marginal cost to delivering those assets and so forth. We don't anticipate having thousands and thousands of users. But a value that was instilled in me very early is a sense of minimalism. I will get by on the free tier of every service that I use as a developer for as long as possible, not only because I'm cheap, but because there's a knock-on benefit of the essentialism of, hey, can I do this in a more efficient way? Can I do this in a way that doesn't require upgrading to the next tier? Can I compress what I'm doing? The best answer of all is, can I do less? And so I was going to just read through dramatically the 35 commits that I had last Tuesday on this. As I fixed it in Safari, saw how that broke Chrome and Chromium browsers, unbroke it in Chrome, rebroke it in Safari, fixed it in Safari. It was a whole journey. So effectively what it does now is it tricks the browser into thinking that behind the poster is a video that's literally a one frame black video of nothing. And the properly behaving browsers will know to not download that. And then when they click it, we sub it out for the real video, and then they can start buffering. And Safari is tricked into it and will download the one frame video. And then when they click it, it'll sub out the real video, and then they'll download the real video. And that way, now, this isn't just about being a cheapskate on my server costs, right? The CDN is no longer getting slammed. But it's also like Safari, the behavior of the app is a lock, stock, and barrel, 60 frames a second on my Mac, 120 frames per second on my iPhone after making this change. And it was chunky before. And the page load, right? The load indicator showing that it was done is way faster. But those are the kinds of little touches I'm in. I'm still going end to end. I have not actually finished building the app per se. I'm very close though, and I can taste it. I can taste it. And it tastes like I've been working on this for 7 full months. I am not fast, but I am thorough. The thing that I was working on recently is I'm kind of curious. Before I say what it is, imagine a website, right? A website that tells you about workouts and gives you a few workouts to choose from, and you set up that workout. Just imagine you're in a progressive web app or a full screen desktop app, and you click start workout. What do you expect to see? Just take a minute, right? Take a minute and ask, what metaphor, what kind of user interface would you expect? What would make sense? There are plenty of other fitness apps, and they all show shit. Some of them have video involved, some don't. Some are like, the Peloton model of like you're just watching or the Fitness Plus, Apple Fitness Plus. You're just kind of watching a never-ending video of a thing, and like the overlay changes with time, which requires you to kind of keep up with it, which I have found through strength training with Tonal. Not a great system of trying to get people to rush through weightlifting exercises. It's a recipe for injury and confusion. What kind of interface would you build? So where I landed is a like a tape player metaphor. So first of all, you go from a normal web interface with like a tab bar or a sidebar in larger formats, and it takes over the screen. It's a full screen thing now with like clear progress of the blocks and the sets at the bottom. And you can navigate the blocks. Everything is big and chunky, like if you're holding up a phone, right? And you propped it up against a machine. So the mandatory scrolling is kept to an absolute minimum, right? The buttons are big. You can click complete set. You can say skip this set. You can go next and previous, right? There's like 5 kind of actions. You can go more, and like if at this point you're in the workout, you realize you need to change the workout again, you can go and change the movement at that point. You'll be able to write notes for yourself of like, hey, at RPE, rate of perceived exertion number 7, I put in, 50 pounds or whatever. And you'll be able to view those notes in the future, right? So what I love about user interface design like this is I'm thinking, especially when it's for an app that you could yourself imagine using, I'm thinking about what are the priorities right now for the person in the headspace where they are. Like maybe they're sweaty. So maybe instead of doing the standard 40-point touch target that Apple recommends on the iPhone, maybe I should bump that up to 60. Because if there's sweat on the thumb, the tapping will be less accurate. I know scrolling is less accurate when a phone gets wet. So like let's minimize the need for scrolling or make scrolling strictly to secondary tasks like looking at the details of the movement. But keep the prominent stuff of like how many reps or the timer, keep that near the top so that they don't need to scroll to reach that information. The cells, right? Like, so the individual sets, you could make each of those tap targets, but they're so tiny if it's a long workout. It makes way more sense just to have the block be like the first block, second block, third block of the weightlifting. Like have that be the clickable thing. And then just instead highlight what set is active and give them another way to go forward and back in the sets with different buttons. And it looks kind of like this, tape deck player. I love building user interfaces like this that are purpose built to the context that the user is going to be in. And I can get really into it, right? Like I spent the better part of 2.5 days just at my notebook drawing pictures. I worked with Becky. I sat down and we both kind of drew what we were imagining. And she would sketch out, an idea, and I would point out like, okay, well, here's these constraints that the person's under. So what do you think? And we landed the plane at like, what I think is a really smart design. We're going to practice it. We're going to play test it ourselves once it's finished. But then, and this is, I think, just the nature of being a developer who wears multiple hats, right? So there I'm in the kind of product consultant hat or user interface, user experience designer hat. And as soon as we agree this is the path forward, I put on my developer hat and then I like turn to user interface or user experience, Justin. I'm like, that motherfucker. This is way harder now. Like I wasn't going to do any of this tracking of the state of the where they are in the workout. But now, because they're able to move around and complete and skip and are keeping all these notes, it's like, man, there's so much state information about like what's the state of the UI that I can't help, but I'm going to need to persist that. And if I'm going to persist that, what's a way to persist it in a way that is going to be future-proof, right? Like where if I'm not interested in tracking a whole bunch of this information for like longitudinal reasons, right? Like if I'm not, where this is not meant to be one of those apps that algorithmically computes how much weight you should be lifting. Instead, it's about like learning enough about weightlifting and like, what, letting you set your own, like teaching you to the point that you're comfortable setting your own weights, right? And if you just allow for that, if you allow for people will set their own weights of stuff when they're lifting, then you can excise about 80% of the data and algorithmic complexity of delivering a high quality app. And if you can do that, back to the user interface, that could be a lot simpler. So then it's like, I don't know. I don't want to pretend there's so many hats here, but like I'm a developer and I'm like, man, how do I deliver what we just agreed on with the minimum amount of state? The minimum amount of things that are saved in the browser and the minimum number of things that have to be like in memory and the minimum number of things that have to be saved in the server, and what actions get pushed up to the server to update some database column such that if they load the same page on another device, they'll be at the same point in their workout, for example. Additionally, like another big place where state comes up is like if they refresh the page at any point, what is the level of granularity where sometimes when you refresh a page, right, it means that people want to reset the state of the page. They want to clear out the form. Sometimes, a lot of times nowadays, when you refresh the page, you want it to basically be where you left off. You don't want to get punted back to the beginning of the checkout window. I have built this app before. I built an app just like this with the Japanese language app I have, where like you plan out the lessons and reviews that you're going to do, and you hit go, and then you go into a full screen experience where all you're doing is typing in the answer to a series of questions and clearing an inbox of those questions. Having all of the state live in both the server and the client in a sticky enough way was a lot of work. It was a full-blown JavaScript app, a React app on the front end, and a full-blown Rails API on the back end. And keeping those two things in sync was a goddamn nightmare. I didn't know it was a nightmare. I was feeling pretty good about the pace that I was able to keep up. And I was indeed able to deliver something working relatively quickly. But now that I see that what I actually built was two sort of relatively, they're not rickety, they're not poorly constructed, but these two towers that have nothing in common except for like they are we in programmer speak, we say that something is tightly coupled if it's like really, really tangled up with something else. And if we pull out, like say like these two bits of code into two files or something, right? We call that decoupling it. And then we say that's like loosely coupled, right? So these are separate things now. When two things exist with no like formal relationship, but if you change either of them, it totally breaks the other one spookily at a distance, I like to say that is tightly decoupled. It's kind of the worst of both worlds. Now you've got separate things in separate places, but they don't have a formal contract between them. And I could achieve that, right, if I did, like a type-based language or had like an API contract between the two things. But there are tools to solve that problem. But you could actually like, what I'm finding is, and I'm having a great experience, I'm building with the Ruby on Rails 7 stuff. And instead, when you click a button, in general, most of the time, it's going to go to the server. It's going to download this little snippet of HTML and update just that part of the page. And not require you to keep a scratch pad on the browser of all the changes, and not require you to have a whole bunch of one-off, uploads of little snippets of data to keep the database up to date. In general, when you do stuff in this app, it will only sip data from the server that as it needs. But if you refresh the page, the whole thing will re-render correctly using exactly the same template logic. So I'm not building the universe two times. I'm building it one time with some seams in there that I can just say, hey, this one can be kind of like grabbed a la carte by the client. And then just a little bit of glue to say, hey, when you click this, it grabs this part a la carte. I had intellectually bought into that dream for apps like this that require, interactivity, but they're not insanely, it's not like I'm building a game or a music player. Like it's okay for this to be merely very fast, but it's not like the app is a widget. It's a website with extra steps. I'm glad that I get to speak about like how I built this and the things I learned and the specifics of the tools coming up at Rails World in September, because more than a set of tools, it's a mindset shift. And the end of the day is, like I said earlier, you get to do less. I built that player interface in 2.5 business days. And I got it working end to end. I showed it to Becky. She was dancing because like it's so much better than the competition that we're considering. And also she's been doing a much better. Her number one thing she's learned as in her time as product owner is pretend to be happy and delighted, and Justin will be more motivated. So maybe there was some of that going on. But the best thing that you can do is less. And if you can, instead of building an app on the front end and an app on the back end, and then just hope and pray that you can keep the two things in sync, and instead just build one application that there's one source of truth, it's whatever the full web page would load, then the amount of variance and deviation that you can get from that by replacing little tiny bits of the page using the same source code effectively just to download those little bits of the page, it's way lower risk. So I don't know. I just went on the tangent, I guess. This is the only real, I guess the headline of this follow-up is like the work on this app continues apace is teaching me, in many ways it's validating things that I've been saying publicly, but without a lot of evidence, which is quite relieving. And in many ways it's teaching me new ways to communicate things that I consider to be eternal truths about software. Like, for instance, if you have written any software in your life, you've probably dealt with what to do about duplication. Oh, well, I need to if else this in this case. If this, then that. And then you find yourself very shortly after needing the exact same if else condition. And the first thing you could do is copy paste it. But now you have now that code has two reasons to change. It could, either of those places might need to change. It would be better probably most of the time to extract that duplication into a thing that kind of encapsulates that if else. And people tend to project their personal temperament through things like, what's your opinion on code duplication? We have an expression, dry, don't repeat yourself. Some people are really zealous advocates that you should never duplicate any code. It's a violation of a principle. The antonym of dry is wet. Write everything twice, which is when it's said, and it's not often that I hear it these days, but it's a pejorative, right? It's like, oh, look at these people duplicating stuff. My computer science professor, Dr. Friends, when I was in college, he said he liked the rule of three. The first time you do something, if you have to do it a second time, be okay with that duplication, but then a third time, then you should think about building an abstraction for it, right? Because a thing duplicated 2 times is probably not going to bite you in the ass, but the thing duplicated 5, 6, 7 times, suddenly now, you're talking a real problem if you just change it in the one place and then you have to figure out why all your data is slightly out of sync. But as I'm building a full stack application with a lot of front end bits, a lot of database bits, and some application bits in the middle on the server, I'm thinking about how my own perspective on my degree of comfort with duplication differs in different contexts. Like in the database, there is no duplication. There are a couple kind of vanity columns. Like I've got a column called canceled somewhere. Like you can cancel a workout. For simplicity of queries, I added an additional column called completed. So it's a true false. It's canceled. But you would never want data to get into the case of like, canceled is true, but completed is, you know what I mean? Like in my little universe, you can either cancel a workout or complete it. That's the only available finished state. And I wanted to have this Boolean there just as a convenience. But like modern databases allow for virtual columns that like there's no actual data there. And so I just made a virtual column that says, hey, the definition of completed is the finished at timestamp is set and canceled is false. That means completed. So there's no real duplication because the things are kind of, there's a quantum entanglement between those two. In the application itself, when I have to do kind of like grunt work, like save a big model that's connected to a bunch of other models and like it's up from a form, maybe multiple forms can save that thing. I have built a very skinny thing that just does all of the normal plumbing that typically occupies controller code. Like, so if you receive a bunch of parameters from a form on your server and everything goes great and you just save it, then you typically will redirect to some other place. And if you take a bunch of those parameters and you try to save it and there are any errors, then typically you want to populate something that will show the errors and then re-render the page so that the person can fix those errors in the form. And this is sort of like this exact little flow is typically duplicated dozens and dozens of times across every Rails app. And as we now have to configure which parameters are different people allowed at different times to upload into that form for security reasons, the risk of kind of wanton duplication is like, oh shoot, if you set that field in this place, then that field will get ignored because we forgot to explicitly permit it. I realize if you're not a developer, this is probably extremely boring or confusing. Apologies. But I built a thing that reduced that amount of duplication by handling that basic flow in the default state, but not going to such an extreme that I like forced it to never occur outside the context of that little mini framework that I built for handling basic persistence. Because in the middle tier of the application, I'm okay with like a little duplication because like these things are, naturally going to differ. But in the front end here, what I'm seeing is I've got like 8 across like these 3 apps that I've built in like different UIs, probably 8 or 9 different things that are a card, like a card-like interface of a thing that goes in a list or a grid of items that can be clicked on. And all of them are a little bit different, but I don't care because they all are custom built for just the information that page needs. And it's not so hard to make another one. It's not the end of the world if I have the same like 45 Tailwind classes copy pasted in 2 places. And if it ends up that one of them has an inconsistent rounding versus the others, that is actually less bad than trying to have a single card template have all the ifs and elses needed in order to handle all of the edge cases in the ways in which those UIs are different. And so all of this to say, these series of anecdotes is like what I'm realizing is that my comfort level with duplication increases as I approach the periphery and the extremities of the application. So the user interface, I'm comfortable with a lot of duplication because like there's nothing vital there. It's if one piece of the user interface fails, it's kind of like an isolated problem and I can fix it where it occurs. In the middle of the application, like having a bunch of duplication there, it can cause serious security issues. It can cause like inconsistency around how the data gets stored. So like I try to minimize it, but I'm not, not too extreme about it. Especially if you got good tests. But when it comes to the data, I'm like very, very thoughtful and I take my time to make sure that the data is exactly like it's minimalist and it's essential and it's nothing extra. And so I was just thinking the other day, it's like, oh yeah, it's sort of like our extremities as humans, or I don't know, imagine a type of animal that can grow its limbs back like a starfish or an octopus. Like the extremities are furthest from the heart. That's where I don't know if you know this, but like your fingers and toes are more likely to be the home of genetic mutations as partly we think partly I hear, due to the fact that they get lower blood flow. And you know what? It's fine. So you're more likely to have weird cysts and boils and shit on your pinky toe, or a nail that just never grows back, or a nail that grows into something else, right? Than you are to have like your heart grow another chamber. And so it's working alone in an application, living in it for a while with an eye to how do I do this well enough that I don't have to think about it again once it launches, that it's going to basically run itself, has been such a fantastic experience. I would recommend it to anyone. For like if you have the time and the ability, my relationship with software I don't think has ever been healthier, and I'm more motivated than ever to work on it. It's a struggle for sure. Stuff like fighting with like, how does the video tag work in all these different browsers has been a goddamn nightmare in a lot of ways. But it's been a real pleasure to be able to connect a lot of the thought leader bullshit that I've been spewing on the internet for most of my career to an application where like I've got some skin in the game. That's always the rub on consultants, right? Because there's a lifelong consultant. Steve Jobs has a quote like, consultants they're all bullshit because they don't have to live with the product or the consequences of the bullshit that they tell you. And like that is literally true. But I'm also really glad that a lot of the bullshit I've been saying, it seems to be panning out okay. So my intuition's credit to my intuition. Another follow-up item, Jedi Survivor. This is quite a segue. Star Wars. The video game that I was playing, told you about last time. I finished it. I finished a goddamn video game, which is hard for me. I did play on story mode. So the difficulty levels used to be easy, medium, hard, or euphemistic language therein. But in recent years, story mode is often available to people who don't want a challenge. They just want to blast through the game without any impediments. If I'm playing a game primarily for the story and the experiential side of it, anytime I fail a mission and I have to redo a thing, it's like watching a movie and being forced to rewind 5 minutes because I clicked the wrong thing. So games like this, like highly narrative scripted games, I tend to play in story mode. But I would even like by story mode standards, like Jedi Survivor is really goddamn easy. Like you can just mash the X button and basically win. And so I told myself, you know what? Like, what if I never spent a single skill point? Like you level up and you get skills and you can like upgrade all your little Jedi things and you different, lightsaber stances and force pull and push and different effects. And so I actually beat the game never using a single skill point. So I had 39 skill points remaining. And I was proud of that. So I found a way to like instill just a little tiny bit of challenge, and part of that challenge was the tantric refusal of the satisfaction of upgrading all of my skills. So that was fun. It was overall, I think, a very good game. I think an improvement on the first game in a lot of ways, but somehow the first game was such a breath of fresh air because that franchise, video game wise, had been so dormant for so long that I can see why a lot of people would pick up the sequel and feel like it was just more of the same. To me, it feels like this is the Empire Strikes Back. This is the second chapter in a trilogy where things are kind of like, pretty dark. And the big bad, the big villain at the end and stuff, like I think that was handled pretty poorly. But it's, these days we have to take the AAA games that we get, and they're fewer and further between. So my goal was to finish it well in advance of the next big Star Wars game, since we just live in a world of 4 or 5 different cinematic universes, and Star Wars being one of them. So the next big Star Wars game is Outlaws from Ubisoft, different developer, different publisher. And that's going to be more of an open world game, and you play a scoundrel, so you get a blaster. And my experience with Jedi Survivor was good enough that I'm like now excited about that game too, which is an unusual feeling to have. Normally, I'm like ready to just shift into any genre that's far enough away from where I started. My palate cleanser between games lately has always been a farming sim, so I'm back to my Stardew Valley. Almost to 3 years. Don't tell Becky, but I got married to Leah, the artist. I've got a pretty solid, year 2, winter day, like 8. I've got a pretty solid cellar situation with like probably 45 casks. I got the greenhouse full of nothing but ancient fruit. Now I'm going to sound like a real sicko to everyone listening who's not both a developer and a Stardew Valley aficionado. So I'm aging a lot of ancient fruit wine. Some raccoons moved in to a tree nearby, and they keep asking for different products, and so I'm working my ass off trying to find more purple mushrooms that I can put in my fruit dehydrator, so that I can get him a bag of dehydrated purple mushrooms to find out what he or she wants. I'm losing control. So that's all the follow-up. That's all I got. Yeah. If you have experience, going back to the Dev Diary stuff, I would love to hear stories from you on opinions that you used to hold really tightly that you had to either moderate or contextualize over time. Like the duplication thing, right? Like there was a time when like I was a zealot. Any amount of duplication was evil, and I was at a beginner novice enough level that it was healthier for me to believe a thing really firmly than to get lost and overwhelmed in the complexity of nuance. And as time goes on, I have the capacity to both juggle the 38 things that I needed in my head to keep that feature, making forward progress on that feature, while also being cognizant of the changing context of how am I doing what I'm doing, right? Like as I go, and how are these values that I have presenting themselves as principles, and how do those principles and practices change in various contexts? If you've experienced this sort of change in your own career or your own experience, whether it's about programming or just anything that you felt like was 100% true but no longer is, I'd love to hear those stories, because I think it's a fascinating place to be. podcast@searles.co. I will read that story. But now it's a story that's not of my own control. It's time for my friend Aaron Patterson to read a pun for us. Well, write a pun for us. I have to read it, and then I got to react to it. So I've got it loaded up in my tape deck. Invisible ink. Oh boy. It is a medium length. Last version, his pun was multi-paragraph. Okay, Aaron writes, I'm in Singapore this week for Red Dot Ruby Conf. I have learned that many people here either love the king of fruit or they're just enduring it. I'm going to read that one more time and then we're going to have a chat. I'm in Singapore this week for Red Dot Ruby Conf. I have learned that many people here either love the king of fruit or they're just enduring it. If you don't know what a durian fruit is, it is a gross, yellow, stinky fruit that is available in Singapore. I've never had durian. All I've had is the one time that I went to Singapore, I was on the subway and there was a sign of like no smoking, no food and drink, no chewing gum, and no durian fruit. And like a picture of a shopping basket or shopping bag with a big durian fruit. It's a big spiky thing. It looks like something it looks like the egg of a villain from a like Muppet show like Fraggle Rock. It looks like something's going to hatch from that, and you don't want to be there when it does. Where does this land? You know what? I'm going to look towards the top, and there's some that need to get knocked down a peg. I think that enduring it versus enduring it is good. I like it. It feels good to me. I'm going to say this is better than seeing Billy Joel in concert tonight, and thankfully nobody started a fire, which I liked a lot at the time, but I don't think is worth being number 5. But this is still nowhere near. I loved playing AAA games as a kid, but replacing the batteries got really expensive. That's a classic. So I'm going to plop this in. This is our new number 5 pun. There, I'm being very decisive. New number 5 pun. I'm in Singapore this week for Red Dot RubyConf. I have learned that many people here either love the King of Fruit or they're just Endurian it. And that's true. Yeah, durian is a love or hate piece of produce. All right, well, the pun's out of the way. Thank you, Aaron, as always, for your contribution to the show, but the show must go on. That's right. Time for the news. Not a lot. Through certain lenses, there's actually a lot of news and tech going on right now, or stuff of interest. But honestly, I have not been particularly agitated by what's going on in tech right now, nearly to the extent that I usually am. And part of it is indeed the distraction of my having briefly flirted with a presidential run, but I got that out of the way at the top of the show. And part of it's just like, summer's usually slow, but I think a lot of the plot beats that we're seeing now are either echoes of the past or like logical next steps in stories that we kind of saw coming. So, perfect example, Search GPT, where OpenAI has branded GPT, which rolls right off the tongue. It's a prototype that you can sign up for with a wait list. And what it lets you do is it lets you type into a thing that looks an awful lot like ChatGPT, but what if the search bar or the chat bar was in the middle of the page? And then you type the same shit. And then you got the same kind of responses back, but instead of... so right now, if you use ChatGPT, especially if you've got Plus, the $20 a month subscription, it will search the web for you, but very often, like you can tell it's tuned to try to rely on stuff it knows because it probably costs money to like do the search and then come back with more. So very often I have to tell it, no, dummy, search. And then it'll go to the search and it'll come back and it'll have these little like quote marks next to the statements it makes based on what it searched. And very often it'll say a thing super confidently and give you a little quote mark next to it. And you can click the link. And then the thing that it said and the thing of that link have very little to do with each other. Like, I don't like the thing you said was in Stephen Colbert terms, truthy, seemed true, seemed plausible. But the citation that you offered either says the opposite or says nothing of the kind, which is incredibly concerning. Well, they're turning that like edge case feature into more of a forward product is the wrong term. I think where they're going is that these are different manifestations of the same fundamental thing. It's like, well, if you're in ChatGPT, you're primarily chatting, but some searching will also happen. And if you're in Search GPT, you're primarily searching, but some chatting will also happen. And that's kind of like if you look at any of the articles unveiling it or their little demo videos. That's kind of, what we're talking about here. You type in a search, it's like, hey, what's the example they give? What day do the Olympics start? Which, if you know anything about like the online internet publishing industry, you know that like websites like CNET will have a page dedicated to what time is the Super Bowl this year, and tons of like Rolling Stone. Why is Rolling Stone it's because they know a bunch of people are hitting those search keywords, and the more matches they get against people's search terms, SEO magic happens and it pulls more people into their site, with more ads, and then that boosts the page rank or the domain rank of whatever their publication is, such that it redounds to stuff that does make. It's if Google goes out of business because of the amount of low quality content that they have incentivized, due to the fact that something like Search GPT can come along and just be like, here's the answer, I will not shed a tear. But the most interesting thing, and if you go through and you click this piece, is like they are very loud and proud saying that like Search GPT is being built in collaboration with partners, our publishing partners. And if you haven't been following the business side of OpenAI and the disruption that the LLMs are having as a potential threat to search, if you haven't been following it closely, I think the best coverage on this has been Nilay Patel at The Verge. So if you listen to his podcast, you already know this already. The deal, yes, there was a court case. There was a lawsuit about whether or not Google could index all these websites and put up a little synopsis or even a direct quote from those websites into its search pages. Google won the case as fair use, in part because Google wasn't displacing those publications. They were, in fact, driving traffic to those publications. And so if you look at the four, factors of what constitutes copyright fair use, they win that case, and the precedent is now like you can index stuff and you can regurgitate that for the public. The difference in ChatGPT regurgitating the stuff for the public is it very rarely will cite a source, and if it cites something, it very often is incorrect. It'll just displace your demand for, whatever that source article that somebody else invested in, offers. And so from the economic side of what constitutes fair use, like that raises more questions, and so it makes all kinds of sense for OpenAI to, this is a prototype, it's not a product, to try to burnish a relationship with publishers that is not just we pay you a licensing fee to train on your data, because at this point, if they did that, they'd be paying everyone everything. Apple does a deal with New York Times, right? So that they can basically, it's lawsuit insurance, right? Because New York Times is suing OpenAI over the same thing. But they quote the CEO of The Atlantic about, this new era of technology and where we're going. But I don't, other than making like the link at the end of these different citations say the name of the publication as opposed to just being like a single character blue quote mark, it'll be interesting to see. Like, I signed up for the wait list. I'm a Plus subscriber, so hopefully I get in soon. I'm very interested to see how they've tuned this in terms of its propensity for made up bullshit versus trying to stay true to the source articles that it's linking to. Are we seeing search results but more intelligent and better summarized, which is, I think, much more the direction that Apple has been going in their, more modest Apple Intelligence series of features? Or are we just seeing ChatGPT gussied up a little bit to like not piss off major publishers so that they don't have to deal with the same, so that they can hide behind the same dressing of copyright fair use that Google got away with? Of course, ironically, if they do, they will very likely, be boxing Google out, unless and until Google is able to get their Gemini shit up to snuff. And they seem to be just stepping on rakes left and right. So at this point, it's very similar to the kind of joking observation of 10, 11 years ago. It's like, well, what's going to happen will Netflix become HBO faster than HBO can become Netflix? That is to say, producer of high quality content faster than HBO can figure out how to stream videos on the internet. It's pretty clear HBO won that one, Netflix won that one. Although again, like the fact that HBO has faltered is a many splendored series of fuck ups by lots of people. The only other big news story is CrowdStrike CrowdStrike. I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone directly at CrowdStrike. Security company, IT, enterprise security, blah blah blah. I have a general incuriosity when it comes to most software security stuff because speaking of contextual, like it's unless it's in my area of like what I'm doing and what I'm building, like I don't stand much to gain to really understand different like security products and what they really do. But hey, CrowdStrike has penetrated probably all of the Forbes 500 and is able to take down major airline carriers for days on end. So what happened was they pushed out an update. Their software on Mac OS and Linux desktops and servers does not have kernel access apparently. So those were not affected. But Windows being just this goopy, no holds barred free for all where anyone can write any normal user space application can write kernel extensions and code that affects the kernel. The kernel is if you're not a computer person, just think of it as the I guess using body analogies, right? Like we've got our voluntary nervous system and voluntary functions that we can think about as humans. Like breathing is voluntary. I can choose to stop breathing or autonomous right now. But I don't have the same control over my heartbeat. I can influence it secondarily. The kernel is like the thing that's keeping the system, the computer's like body regulation going, right? Like all of the system calls happen there, all of the like the really important stuff. And it's like, that's the stuff that's most important to be really secure. And I think people do like a hand wavy thought, well, it's a security product, so it should have access to that. Well, the problem, of course, is it's also this place of tremendous vulnerability where all it takes is we're not talking about a security problem. CrowdStrike was not hacked. There wasn't a security issue. It was a mundane programmer error that put out an update to a piece of software that has access to the Microsoft Windows kernel and oriented in just such a way that in order to unfuck it up, you have to reboot the computer into safe mode because it's not just a normal program. It gets into the innards. So pretty quickly, this is old news, I guess, at this point, but like from where I'm sitting, it turned into a series of the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme where, well, CrowdStrike is, they got some egg on their face, but they are pointing to, well, is it fair to say that they blamed anyone else? I think that the CEO who had been the CTO at, was it McAfee during extremely similar problems in the past of kind of running a bit too fast and loose. Microsoft, they pointed out not that CrowdStrike was at fault, but rather that the European Commission of Digital Markets Act fame years ago required the equivalent of like a consent decree that like Microsoft, in order to foster competition and not do anything, not have privileged access to their own system, would have to allow kernel level access by, normal user installed programs. And so Windows does. And Microsoft was very quick to blame Europe for the vector by which CrowdStrike broke all their computers, which is fair. You read like I've been a loyal-ish Delta flyer for years. I got the credit cards, I do the loyalty game. I try to fly Delta so I can get the points, I can get the status tier, so I got the lounges to go to, get some upgrades, whatnot. Well, Delta was like down for days. It was nationwide news, and their broader system was apparently much more fragile than a lot of others because they were down for days and days. And I think what happens is like, in this, like in the era that we live in with like post deregulation airlines, the major carriers all having a handful of hubs, that travel to a lot of spokes. We saw this with Southwest like last year or the year before, the Christmas where everyone got stuck in Denver or whatever the fuck, where a hub and spoke airline doesn't have enough redundancy to handle an event that brings down everything for a few hours or more. There's a tipping point beyond which some number of your crews and planes are stranded in the exact wrong place. And to recall them and to get them back would put all of those crews over the limit of how long that they're able to be kind of like active and at work in a given time period. So they either can't get back, or if they did get back, there's nothing you could do with them. And so all of your inventory and your human resources are in like the exact wrong place to actually get people where they need to go. And so it's, in this case, Delta is they just fell apart for days on end. And Southwest CEO, when this happened to them a couple years ago, he called it like a reboot. Like after everything had fallen apart, now you're hearing the same thing with Delta, where like most of these planes going to Atlanta are just full of more crew to try to get all of the planes out of, and moving all those parts and pieces back into place. Really, really hard. Delta's, CEO Ed Bastian, I think it's Bastian. I don't know. I'm going off memory. I don't have it in front of me. He rolled out, a moderation, paring back the loyalty benefits and how easy it is to gain status at Delta. Delta's customer loyalty had famously said years and years ago that if everyone has status, then no one does, and that's true. The lounges rent is too damn high, and the lounges are too damn full. But of course, no one wants to be. No one's going to them being like, you know what, I'm willing to sacrifice my spot in the lounge so other people can have like a little bit more of a cushy space, right? Everyone feels entitled to it because we all bought credit cards that entitled us to it. And then Delta was like, and we want to make all this money because we like this money that we just made, but also this is a really bad customer experience. I was like platinum several years in a row without a single fucking seat upgrade. Which means something if you're a sicko that follows this stuff like me and tries to play the game. So my Delta loyalty has been waning regardless of this. In fact, a lot of the budget carriers that have more point-to-point nonstops seem to be, at least here in Orlando, more reliable. And this is, incidents like this can explain why. So taken in combination, the CrowdStrike thing where you just knock out most enterprises' Windows machines overnight, just boom. And now they can't communicate because maybe they have a IT policy where you can only access your email on company hardware, and oops, all the company hardware is now broken, right? So now you get people who work remotely who don't know how to go into safe mode and unwind a patch. So you got people like IT guys trying to use people's personal email addresses to teach them how to reboot their fucking computers. You've got a major carrier like Delta that works really, really well as long as no delay is more than 2 hours, at which point everything is a series of dominoes, and then like one cancellation is going to lead to another, which is going to lead to a cascading series of failures, at which point the only way to recover is a full-blown reset button of their entire fleet, which takes days, and the collateral damage are all the people who are sleeping on the floor at ATL in Atlanta. So I don't know what to say other than people need to think harder about dependency management and fault tolerance, but we live in a world where the economy is kind of, more or less rewards people for playing it fast and loose and assuming that, even if the worst does happen, it'll pass soon enough and people will forget about it that they'll keep on using your product. And that, like, cynically, it's probably better. Like, it would probably be so expensive and onerous, not only to, like, if quality was a knob that you could twist up and down, whether we're talking about software or broader systems, if you could just say, all right, well, what's this cost to build this supply chain? $200 million. Well, let's get a really nice one. Like, let's not do the Toyota. Let's get the Lexus. Let's upgrade this supply chain, make it real nice. Let's spend $300 million. Like, that money And that level of investment doesn't necessarily get you anything when the problem is you have the wrong mental model for what you're building in the first place, right? If you have to root and branch, pull out the way that you think about this shit, such that it's not just one big expense. It's a mindset shift that is going to make everything, the old way of doing things, impossible to do, and the new way of doing things require everyone to get on the same page of how they do things differently. And short of a government coming in and regulating the airlines and saying, hey, we're going back to the pre-regulation times where you have to do these fixed rates and you have to support these different, all of these enumerated routes. And if you want to fly planes, then just figure out how to do what we tell you that you have to do in a profitable way. Short of doing something like that, the cynical calculation of let's run fast and loose, and then when things fall over, we'll just have a bad week, and some people will not get to go to their grandma's funeral. That's sad, but our margins will be better for it. So big picture, it's better. An example of, I think, a happy medium for government, I realize this is not a political podcast, but the relatively apolitical, federal transportation department, I think, is fair game in cases like this. Just like FEMA is typically the Federal Emergency Management, Administration. We typically don't talk about them in terms of partisan politics so much, but Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation, and he has been pushing, I think it's called, I should know what it's called, flightrights.gov, basically a passenger bill of rights kind of website where you can put in specific complaints. First, to understand what are you entitled to. For example, if your flight's canceled, you're entitled to a cash refund, not just a credit. If you're on the tarmac for more than 2 hours, they're required to give you a substantive snack and water. Things like that. But people don't know those, so you can educate yourself by going to this website that I hope is named that. But that's getting that news out is hard. Getting awareness in an era where no one watches broadcast television, where you could just buy a PSA, right? It's hard. And if you're in government and you're trying to, because look, it's not just about teaching people their rights, right? Or that they can go to this website and file a complaint and actually hope to get some kind of remediation. It's that when everyone complains the right way and uses the right language and informs the companies that they know what their rights are, the company is more likely to be pressured to figure their shit out than doing what they currently do, which is in this case, it seems like Delta kind of landed at, we don't have enough hotel vouchers for the hotels in the Atlanta airport area. So we're going to basically limit everyone to 1 night voucher, even if they're here for 4 nights, and kind of round robin the shit. And then you have a line from one end of the terminal to the other, 8-hour long phone lines. So we're providing the level of service that we are mandated to, but we're not staffing up customer service to the emergency degree that we would need to in order to give people what we are required to in a timely fashion. And then the likelihood that they're going to know that if they keep their receipts and they file a thing after the storm has passed, then and typically the airlines are usually good at this. They will take your receipts and they will send you a check. And I've had to do this before because I've gotten stuck overnight on connections probably 8 times in the last 10 years, which is super fun. And probably 3 or 4 of those times I had to privately buy my own hotel room and car, or hotel room and food, and then go and file for reimbursement after the fact. And 1 or 2 of those times I had to be really loud about it. Anyway, Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, he did a Pete Buttigieg reads angry tweets at Delta YouTube video. And apart from being entertaining and somewhat humanizing, because typically, politicians don't get to do real meaningful shit anymore that impacts people's lives typically. I feel like there is a thread here of social media engagement like this as almost a prerequisite to any kind of public service that requires civic engagement. Is you need to, I hate the phrase go viral, but by partnering with in this case, like a Variety or whatever, like by creating compelling content that on its own is interesting enough to share, or humorous or entertaining enough that people will want to engage with it, such that more people will see it. It's not just enough to state the truth anymore if you want that truth to get out. So that was the closest to a happy ending for this, drama that I have as a takeaway. Is it's an interesting. Watch the video, because you walk away thinking like, man, the more people that watch this, regardless of your political affiliation or how you feel about regulation generally, it's like that's going to really punch Delta in the gut, or any of these airlines. And it's going to educate people on, how to apply pressure where they need to in order to get taken care of. And of course, a big picture, the fact that executive orders and laws had to pass to make any of this possible is its own thing. But it's in an era where we often feel beholden to tech companies and living at their mercy. You may relish the idea of living in like a libertarian dystopia where like companies just get to decide all policy by which we live. I'm not quite there yet. I watched this and I started to see, I could chart a course in my mind of what does light touch groundswell, maybe use the word populist, regulatory action look like, rather than the big press conference where the DOJ lawyers all line up and they talk about, here's what Apple did and they broke the law, to an audience of mostly, pool reporters. Instead, the video that is targeted at the individual who is dealing with the problem. Here are your rights and here's what you can do about it, right? So I realize these are different cases, but I thought, there's something to that I feel like is maybe that's where more of this goes, as we live in this era where people my age and younger are going to be the next generation of leaders, who either grew up online or maybe they rose to political power through their ability to shitpost well. What in the post-boomers are all of the leaders in power era, what will that look like as governance as opposed to just, attention grabbing? So, all right. I'll back off. Just thoughts. CrowdStrike. Recommendations. I don't have a lot that, I focus on finishing that game. The only media I consumed in its entirety is since last time we chatted, I finished The Boys with an S. I often think The Boys, the Amazon Prime television show based on the not very good comic book that is I'll just say, if you cringe at anything that I say from that was explicit on this podcast, The Boys television program is not for you. Don't watch The Boys. If you're like, I don't feel anything anymore in my heart, it's just real hard in there, and to make me feel things requires pretty extreme shit, or I am so fucking cynical that I would just love to watch a lot of, really terrible people do really terrible things and turn the volume up to 12. In the interest of satire. Originally, The Boys starts as satire of the Marvel universe. I think in season 1, that's kind of where it was. Season 2 a little bit, but increasingly seasons 3 and 4, and this is 4. The season finale of this series, of season 4, had a disclaimer at the front saying, hey, certain events here are going to look like certain other events there. They're not the same events, just to sort of basically a January 6th trigger warning, because in the show, they're doing a January 6th, a big presidential thing, and a lot of political violence. I I don't know how to feel about The Boys because like I think it's like well produced. I think it's like the moment to moment beats keep my attention really well, but it's also really easy to keep my attention, it seems like. I like the cinematography, I like the cast, I like the characters. The over the toppiness doesn't faze me, as I realize it does a lot. And a lot of people I recommend this show to can't handle it. It's too hot. But if you have watched any of The Boys and you fell off or you forgot that they are making more of it, I recommend go catch up. It's as good as the other ones. There are certain moments, like Will Ferrell has a great cameo, but like showing that cameo to somebody who hasn't watched the rest of the show the payoff won't land. It's just Will Ferrell being Will Ferrell, and the reason it's funny is because the context is ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know. The Boys is pretty good. I'm impressed that it gets made. And it seems like from a who holds what intellectual property perspective, very few companies would be able to pull it off the way Amazon has. So yeah, it's good. Oh shit. I had a whole button for recommendations and I didn't click it. Well, I guess, look, only one recommendation this week. Next week, I'll remember to click the recommendations button. But that does mean I know that, segment changes and so forth. And here we go.
You've got mail.
Ross writes in about Calvin and Hobbes. The subject is something that I don't understand. This must be a reference. Something under the bed is drooling. Hello, Justin. Your Steve Martin commentary in the last episode reminded me of Bill Watterson, the author of the beloved comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. Watterson ended the comic strip in the mid-90s after a 10-year run during which became arguably the most popular comic strip in U.S. newspapers, alongside from Peanuts or Garfield. Watterson then retreated from the public eye and has been heard from very rarely since. Calvin and Hobbes isn't syndicated, so there are no holiday specials or computer-animated Hollywood reincarnations, which probably would have netted Watterson great wealth. A quote from his resignation letter reads, quote, "My interests have shifted, however, and I believe I've done what I can do within the constraints of daily deadlines and small panels." Unquote. Not unlike the way Steve described his exit from stand-up. Now the question. Did I read this in advance? I did not. What's your favorite comic strip now or from your childhood? Nice sound effects, by the way. Well, sorry that I robbed you of the recommendation sound effect, but here you are, juxtaposed with the mailbag one. Ross, I wasn't a religious comic strip reader. My dad was a big paper guy. He always had the paper, especially on Sundays, and he'd go through it, and I'd pick apart at it, like a picky eater. I would look at. I'd always like wind up with like Marmaduke or Kathy and be like, "What the fuck is this shit? Why is this a thing?" The Dagwood and Archie and all that stuff, like those comics, like made no sense to me. I liked Peanuts, but I don't think that I liked Peanuts as a comic strip. I mean, I like it when I see one, I like it, but I think it's because I recognize them from like the videos I grew up watching. So Peanuts is the easy answer, but I don't think it's true. I think for me, like a lot of nerdy 80s kids, for me, it was The Far Side, Gary Larson's, very often single panel comics. Gary Larson, kind of similar, like, well, not maybe to Bill Watterson's extreme. And he in fact started making new comics again recently after 20 some years of retirement. The Far Side comics, if you're not familiar, they feature typically, goofy, low fidelity sketches of animals in silly contexts. And it's observational humor typically, usually with some kind of twist. And the anthology books are fun because like the single panel nature and the fact that they're not episodic is the anthology books. And I had several of them when I was young somewhere. it's fun to consume a dozen or 24 of these at a time. They're thought-provoking. They're clever. I'm sure that to a certain extent, my sense of humor was influenced by Gary Larson. One of the things that I liked about Larson and those anthologies was that he would comment on the peculiarities of the business, right? Where like comic strips were a business that made no sense. You would make a strip and then you'd sell it to papers and they'd put it up and you didn't really have a lot of control over how it was printed or like, which episodes were color and which aren't, or which issues and so forth. Typically, of course, Sunday is the day when most papers would do color prints, but some things would print them out of order and stuff and they might re-ink different things like that. One case, he sold a comic of a bunch of penguins. It was a black and white comic strip as a poster. He talks about this in one of those books. I just happen to remember it. And the poster it's a penguins marching, right? Like a March of the Penguins kind of scene. All these penguins are in Antarctica. They're all white and black against a white tundra background, like between two mountains or something. And there's a penguin in the middle. They all look the same, right? There's a penguin in the middle, and he's singing, "I Just Gotta Be Me." And that's the whole bit. I don't think there's a subtitle. I don't think there's anything else there. And you look at that and you sit with it for a minute, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it is hard to stand out as a human, but like if we were all penguins, following an evolutionary drive to just like all march in the same direction while all looking the same, while often like how the hell do they, they mate for life or whatever? Like how do they even tell who their mate is in this crowd? Anyway, so the intersection of that, that kind of thoughtfulness with business is he sold the rights to do a poster of it or licensed a poster. And when he got the poster proofs back, they made that penguin yellow. So like to make it more visually interesting, they highlighted the penguin and made him a different color than all the other penguins, completely, undermining the joke, or at least calling it a joke might be a little bit generous. The point of the strip, where it's like, no, now he actually is unique. That's something that I think the webcomics have maybe never had this, but I think is interesting about that era of like mediated creative content, especially by a single creator like Watterson or Schultz or like Gary Larson, where like they were not only creating something that then a publisher had to go and like, potentially shit on. Like Charles Schultz got all kinds of shit for responding to a fan letter and making Franklin having a black character, right? And sticking to his guns. You have to now deal with like all of the editors at all of the papers who own the comic strip section. And even if you're not dealing with them directly, my point is you have this very clear line of sight to like the creative message that you want to have. And you have so little control over when it actually gets to the reader. How will it be fucked up somehow? Will it be printed badly or on multiple pages? Like there are all these cases of comic strips where it's just like the final panel didn't fit, and so they printed the first two panels, right? And then people were walking away like feeling really like existential about Kathy. Yeah. All right. In fact, I'm gonna take from this. I'm gonna go look up some Gary Larson comics because some of them are really fucking great. I think I sometimes wonder about the influence of stuff like this from that era and its effect on comedy. I suspect, and I would be curious to go and like Google this to see if he's ever commented. I suspect that Family Guy would have been very different had it not been for Gary Larson. I suspect Seth MacFarlane was probably pretty heavily influenced by Gary Larson's approach to humor. But I could be wrong. There's through lines there. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it. Let's see. Mike writes in, talking about games. I don't know if you have also ever had reached a point with games where, like with Sudoku or Space Chem or similar things, and your brain goes, quote, "This is basically just programming, but more pointless, and it kills your enjoyment." I have. It sucks. I struggle. I used to like simulation games, SimCity and stuff. Nowadays, there's this entire genre of games like Factorio, and where you're building systems that build systems that are like they plug together. There's like a rich degree of like when I say there's a lot of systems, it's like, well, this thing can make this kind of output, and this thing can make that kind. If you combine those two together, so those two factory lines meet, and you combine these two kinds of parts, it can make this third thing. And now I've got this whole crafting thing, and then if you build all of these things up together and you organize this and you supply power to all of them, then you can build this bigger thing, and then you can continually zoom out. And whether it's a puzzle game or a simulation game, what I find is that if I had a good day, on average, if I had a good day, I mentally exerted myself to the point that I have zero gas left in the tank for shit like this. At the end of the day, I want to play on story mode. I'm like, I've been probably programming a lot or working through a bunch of hard problems or having a lot of hard conversations. I want to feel like I left it all on the field. And if I've got time to go and fuck around with a dwarf fortress or some other complicated game, then I will feel like I must have failed to optimize my energy exertion to accomplishment ratio to want to play something like that. And so to your point, yes, I've sometimes played games that were so involved mentally that I found myself sort of not stealing time from my day job or my main vocation, but less engaged as if to preserve time for that hobby. And it's not like, look, I'm not saying games don't matter. I'm a firm believer in nothing pretty much matters. But the world that we live in, there's only so much utility for winning a game, especially a puzzle box kind of game with like the good example is The Witness. It was a really popular game made by the guy who made Braid, which was a fun little platformer that told a story, Jonathan Blow. Spent a whole bunch of time building this game. The Witness is a really simple but challenging game where you have these little grids and you're just doing line puzzles, but you get deeper into this game and you've done 20 or 30 of them and you realize like the only way to proceed in this game is basically to have a notebook or a photographic memory. And to some people, that is super engrossing. And I have always suspected that those people either have like more excess mental capacity than I find myself, especially at the time I tend to play games after dinner at night when I'm trying to wind down. So if you play in the middle of the day and you got some fresh cognition to spare, sure. Or maybe sometimes I wonder, because the only time I found those games engaging is when my day job was very not engaging. When I was working retail in high school, right? Those games were fascinating to me because I could go and exert that mental energy I'd vent it into a not now useful, right? Like through a context that I didn't go to bed with all this like extra mental energy. And not to say like you're not going to grow a third arm or some shit if that happens from time to time, but feeling like your brain is underutilized has always left me feeling just it very quickly leads to me feeling like, what am I even doing here? It makes me feel maybe less useful, maybe, more prone to feel listless, depressed, bored. And when I exert myself, even if it's on something that's like, just a game and only I'm going to see it, I feel more valuable, right? I'm just very, very fortunate that I picked a career that let me find what I consider to be more productive, more impactful ways of that mental exertion through building applications that people can use that actually touch them, or are open source or whatever it is. So yes, Mike, I've been there. And when you're enjoying a game like that, and then you realize this is just programming but less meaningful, it it is a realization that's not very fun. Fortunately, like all of these different genres of different games have become so ossified that you can typically see it coming. But The Witness, I fell off really hard as soon as I was like, oh, this is one of those games for people who have graph paper at home. I'm not gonna, and I wasted my $40 or whatever it was. Brian writes in, okay, you got a laugh out of me for legitimate.us. What a great website of its time that many younglings may not recognize. They don't make websites like they used to. Yeah. So if you've not been, I think I mentioned this 6 or 7 episodes ago. I am the founder of Legitimate LLC. And so I have the domain name legitimate.us, and I refreshed. I got the website up and running again. I'm going to click this link because that'd still be running as an unknown. It looks like a server is trying to wake up right now. Oh boy. Should I click this link? Oh, yep. Okay, cool. It's still up. Yeah. So it's just funny copy. It's silly. It's like repeating the same stock photo over and over again. It just looks like an old site. And write email to me at please@legitimateus. I like gag sites. I wish we made more gag sites. So thank you, Brian. I hadn't thought about that in a little while. That was in the bottom of the mailbox for a while. Let's see. Spencer asks, subject, what happened to the audio? Body, why does the audio in version 16 sound more NPR-like? Also, only 2 hours, 52 minutes. I have a cross-country flight this week. Don't leave me alone with my thoughts. I am so sorry, Spencer. For both problems. The audio has been on a journey the last few episodes. I'm actually thinking about going through all 16 prior episodes and remastering them now that I'm finally happy with it. Here we are. I'll say additionally, when you download the episode has affected the audio quality because I've been going in and issuing minor or patch releases. So I think we're on like the version 16 episode is actually like the file that you'll get now is like 16.3 because I like in response to Spencer's feedback, I went through and remixed it several more times. I had the help of my friend Gary Bernhardt really like educate me as to what I'd been doing wrong. But in short, as a independent podcast person, the simple version, this is the last email I'll pull. The simple version is audio files are relatively simple. They're waves that go up and down at different modulations at different frequencies or some such. You can see a little wave. And doing stuff to those waves with software is just like scaling up and down an image results in pixelation, right? And compression. When it's visual compression, visual artifacting, we see it right away. I don't have the ear for hearing the audio compression that I am inflicting upon you, dear listener. When I do something like, and I think what Spencer was hearing was I had a de-reverb filter to reduce the amount of reverb because my house is particularly echoey because I am a childless cat lady who doesn't have a lot of furniture or rugs. So I've got some noise dampeners in here. I put down a blanket before I record, but I still like to have that de-reverb. And it was on too aggressively on version 16 because I had changed my recording setup to use, you know what, I'm not going to get into it. But like that's the kind of thing where right now I had like 8 plugins in order and they weren't configured particularly, like they were all, I think, too strong. And de-reverb in particular made it sound like, and Gary put it like, it doesn't sound like you're in a room. It sounds like you're in some vacuum, some void. And that's not like, my interpretation. That's not typically how we hear people talk. And so it sounds artificial. But if you sound like you're in a room, it sounds like you're there. You're with somebody. So that room tone is the phrase. Like keeping that in is important. And the solution in my case was recognize that some amount of echo is natural and it's not so bad here, I hope. And so I went from like 8 plugins in the signal chain from input to the master track. And now I'm down to like 6, 5 or 6. So I got rid of several and I toned all of them way down. So now it's just basic EQ. I've got a spectral denoiser from RX10 that is just helps cut some of the hiss in the background, the very low stuff. No one wants that hiss. Nothing to be gained from that. And then the two others, mouth declicker. So any clicking noises I make with my mouth, it does its best job to remove those clicks. Fun fact: if you play the game The Last of Us and you're familiar with or watched the show and you're familiar with the enemy, the clickers, the people whose heads have turned into fungi and they move around making clicking sounds to get around because they don't have eyeballs anymore. Content warning. The clickers were actually created because somebody at Naughty Dog, the game developer, had clicked while he was doing some editing of, I don't know, a vocal track, I assume, an isolation checkbox on a mouth declicker plugin, because you can click to just listen to just the clicks to understand what is it cutting out. And so he just had that checked, and you listen back, and it's like a horrifying kind of like alien sound. And so that's where they got the idea for making the clickers make those finding the exact sound to make for the sonar that the clickers use to get around. I thought that was funny because I knew that anecdote, and then I started editing these things, and I would configure the mouth to clicker, and I'd click isolate, and I'd be like, ooh, it sounds like Last of Us. So a little bit of industry fun if you're familiar. And then the last one I have that's significantly impacting the audio is a Pro DS from FabFilter. So it's a de-esser. So like my S's and sibilants that I make sounds a little bit less sharp. They'll tone that down. But before that, I had the de-reverb. I had a noise gate in front to try to like cut down the number of swallows, but then that would often eliminate parts of breath. That sounds really unnatural. I had a compressor, but the compressor was really just boosting gain and not really needed for controlling loudness. So yeah, that's about it. Yeah, so I've simplified. Long story short, the audio was bad, and now I hope it is less bad. I've put a lot of work into it. I'm happy mostly with the recording setup and how I sound now. It'll always be improved. I would love to further reduce the amount of bass echo in my room by putting up some nice stuff on the walls that would absorb some of that. But for now, for a zero revenue podcast, I think I'm doing okay. If you, dear listener, have anything at all that you want me to talk about or that you want to talk about with me, some people write emails, by the way. They say, hey, don't read this on the air. I just want to talk to you. And then I will engage and I will write them emails back. It's fun. So yeah, write in. podcast@searls.co. And until next time, it's this time.